When people keep quoting these supposedly independent reports, the Australian public must always ask what were the constraints placed on the report that people can make. And we've seen a recent example with the Australian Law Reform Commission report, which the government is citing as an independent report which guides its action, and yet the head commissioner who wrote that report, after publishing the report, said in a conference, "This is not the result we would have liked to have delivered, but we were constrained by the government's terms of reference, which aligned with their policy." And so we need to look at the constraints that these other agencies have and then compare them with the reports that come from overseas agencies. So when we have the rhetoric from those opposite, including from Minister Wong today, who says that nuclear power is the most expensive form, and she quotes $600 billion, we have to then look at their own reports that they commission, such as the CSIRO's GenCost, which says it's about $8.65 billion for a run of nuclear reactors. So round that up, that's about $60 billion. Compare that then to the work that was done by the University of Melbourne, University of Queensland, Princeton University, called the Net Zero Project, estimating the cost. So this is a detailed, scientifically based analysis of the cost of the renewables-only plan that the Albanese government has endorsed. And what they say is that it's a commitment of between $7 and $9 trillion. Let that figure sink in. Worst case, even the exaggerated boast of Senator Wong was $600 billion. More likely, according to CSIRO, it's in the order of $60 billion. But according to the Net Zero Project, the Albanese government wants to spend $7 to $9 trillion. And if you break that down on cost, you'll see that businesses and residents were paying so much more. And the key takeaway from the Net Zero Project was that the clean energy infrastructure investment represents 65 to 77% of the total capital required. And that's why, when you look at independent bodies like the OECD, including the International Energy Agency, who've worked with them to produce a report that was published in April of 2022, they say on page 37 that the costs of reaching net zero with higher shares of variable renewables are likely prohibitive. And why? It's because of the overbuild required in terms of the distributed nature of variable renewables, as well as the infrastructure costs of all the additional transmission lines and the batteries to firm. So these are independent bodies, internationally recognised, who are saying that the assertions from those opposite are clearly not right. They also say that it's going to take far too long. And yet again, in that same report on page 40, it says historical and recent experience show that under the right policy frameworks and a robust programmatic approach, nuclear power can be a low-carbon technology with a rapid delivery time and with the highest rate of annual increase of electricity generation per capita. And that's been borne out if you look at the UAE and what they have achieved in terms of the amount of clean energy in a decade, which dwarfs the amount of energy over a decade that the EU has achieved with their massive investment in renewables. So rather than dealing with the facts of the matter, we see lots of assertions, and more concerningly, we even have the Honourable Patrick Gorman, Assistant Minister to the Prime Minister, using his office resources to send out letters to members of the coalition with little cartoons of what a reactor might look like, inviting us to come to his office and stick it on a map to show where we'd like the reactor to be, so that they can mount a scare campaign with communities. What that shows is that the government is afraid to engage in a fact-based discussion, to take into account all of the evidence from around the world, not only that which is done by scientists and researchers, but the lived experience of countries such as Canada, that show that, as the OECD and the IEA report, long-run nuclear power is the cheapest form of grid-scale electricity for a nation, and because even new nuclear, which is on a par with grid-scaled solar for new build, will run for nearly 5 times the length of solar, it is the cheapest, it is reliable and it is quick to install.